The first thing that happens when you're exposed to extreme cold is that your blood vessels basically vasoconstrict, therefore becoming a lot smaller, trying to preserve as much blood flowing through the vital organs to your brain, to your heart, to your lungs, to your kidneys, and trying to reduce the amount of blood going to other parts of your body, such as your extremities. Athletes have been using it for years to help with healing and also to promote recovery. By exposing yourself to that much cold, you will have an increase in dopamine, which is the feel good hormone. Now, if you decide that you're going to go out and do cold therapy, all you need per week was about 11 minutes. So it's 11 minutes broken up through the week in order for you to get the benefits of cold exposure. Welcome back to the show, and I'm your host, Dr. Gan. Today, we are going to be talking about cold exposure and cryotherapy. Now, the reason I chose this topic was that over the last 12 months, everyone has been either participating in cold baths in order to expose themselves to cold, or they've been doing some form of walking in ice or jumping in ice water. And so I decided to sort of peel it back a little bit and find out whether there are any clinical or scientific evidence to show that there are benefits to cold exposure and whether you should be doing it as well. Now, before I start, in no way am I saying that you should be doing cold exposure, and even the opinions of what I'm doing may be just my opinion. So this is not medical knowledge, and it's important for me to put that out because I do not want anyone hurting themselves, exposing themselves to extremes of cold because they heard it here. Now, the first thing you need to remember when it comes to cold exposure is that when the human body is exposed to any forms of extreme heat or even extreme cold, the most important thing that happens is it's a physiological response whereby your body tries to preserve as much of the heat that it can. That is because it is essential that your vital organs are kept warm. And for that reason, the first thing that happens when you're exposed to extreme cold is that your blood vessels basically vasoconstrict, therefore becoming a lot smaller, trying to preserve as much blood flowing through the vital organs to your brain, to your heart, to your lungs, to your kidneys, and trying to reduce the amount of blood going to other parts of your body, such as your extremities. And so when this happens, the cascade of events that happen next is what we want to avoid, whereby if you are exposed for a prolonged period of time, eventually what will happen is you'll go from vasoconstriction to vasodilatation, and then you'll go through a stage whereby you may feel that you're shivering and eventually reach a point where you're going to hypothermia when your body temperature has dropped to such a level that your body is finding it hard to pump blood all around, and eventually you will go into shock. Now, no one really talks about this because the beautiful side of social media is actually watching people have fun in a group and in a controlled environment whereby they're trying to expose themselves to this cold, and eventually they adapt to it and they feel better. Now, I'm not trying to scare you when I say this, but this is just a normal response. If you were to fall into a frozen lake, this is what will happen, and this is the danger of hypothermia. Now, what people are actually aiming for is very different to what I've just described. Essentially, what they're aiming for and what they claim are the benefits is that by exposing yourself to that much cold, you will have an increase in dopamine, which is the feel good hormone. And they say that it's about 2.5 times an increase in dopamine, which is why you feel fresh, you feel alert, and you feel ready to take on the world because all of a sudden you just feel like you got a shot of energy. The next thing they say is that you also have increased metabolism. So, metabolism is related to, I guess, your weight in some sense, because the higher metabolism is, the more that you're actually burning. And as a result of the metabolism, there's also some suggestion that it helps with your glucose control as well, and eventually also for your heart. So, those are some of the benefits that they have stated, and some of the studies that have shown that these are some of the benefits that can happen. The other thing that can happen is that you can have an increase in oxytocin, which is again one of the feel good hormones. And for that reason, you generally feel a lot happier. Now, one of the things that it's hard to actually study, but they do mention, is that you feel more resilient. And what that means is by doing something really hard, you kind of felt that after doing that hard thing, you feel like you can tackle the world again. It's a benefit. And again, very hard to study this because it's very subjective, but that's what a lot of people feel they get out of getting the cold exposure. Another important factor is the fact that cold exposure has been around for generations. If you look back at the Greeks and even the Egyptians, they were using some form of cold exposure to modulate temperatures and essentially try to heal certain conditions. Now, you can't talk about cold exposure without missing the fact that athletes have been using it for years. And every time you look at a professional game, you will probably potentially find an athlete with ice packs either strapped to their knees, to their ankles, to their hips, to even their chest to help with healing and also to promote recovery. Often, many of them would sit in an ice bath submerged up to their necks in order to help reduce inflammation, reduce pain after certain activities, whether it be a major game that they just played. And this would help promote them to recover faster so that they can get back to training and get back to playing their sport again. So, another form of cold exposure, rather than just ice baths, that has been around and become quite popular in probably in the last 5 to 6 years, would be whole body cryotherapy. Here, they immerse themselves in a chamber that creates a temperature by using liquid nitrogen to increase or rather decrease the temperatures anywhere between minus 80 to minus 140 degrees Celsius. And again, this is a way of promoting healing and also recovery for many professional athletes. But there are chambers available for regular people that want to expose themselves to help um, improve recovery and also potentially even improve healing. So there is another thing called brown fat and white fat. Now, brown fat is actually found in many areas around our neck and around our chest. And it also happens to be found a lot more in women than in men. But brown fat actually contains a lot of cells, such as your mitochondria, that has a lot of energy in it. And for that reason, it actually is involved in thermogenesis or controlling heat regulation within your body. And so by stimulating or exposing yourself to cold, you basically stimulate more brown fat. And this is a very important factor because with brown fat, I will talk about the benefits of increased metabolism that can essentially lead to better regulation of your sugar, as well as better regulation of your weight as well. So, when it comes down to the cold exposure, you're essentially getting a physiological response. And if left for a longer period of time, you may go into shock. And obviously, we are not aiming for that, but we're trying to stimulate as much brown fat as we can. So, one of the things that I found when I went through some of these studies was that the problem with the studies is that most of them were actually done on one, a lot of men. And secondly, most of them were done on people that were already quite athletic or potentially following a lifestyle that was pretty active to start off with. Because some of these studies were also done on people that swim in the ocean regularly. And in these people, they were already quite active and they were often exercising quite a bit. And so because of this, you can't really use all these studies as a almost like a snapshot that the average person would benefit from. And therein sort of lies the issue. Because most of these studies were done for active people, it's very hard to say that this is a blanket rule that would help everyone. And some of these studies that I found were based on Susanna Soberg's work, whereby she felt that the metabolism was improved dramatically. And when metabolism increases, you often get weight loss as well, which is often why some people feel with weight loss, with cold exposure and metabolism increasing, and also increasing brown fat, that it will induce weight loss. But again, the studies for this aren't very good at the moment. And even with Susanna Soberg's work, a lot of it was actually done with people that were already quite active. Now, if you decide that you're going to go out and do cold therapy, and I'm not saying that you should, but if you did decide you wanted to, some of the things with Susanna Soberg's work showed that all you need per week was about 11 minutes. So it's 11 minutes broken up through the week. So you could divide it into a minute here, 3 minutes here, another 4 minutes, up to 11 minutes for that week, in order for you to get the benefits of cold exposure. Now, this is a very important finding because for most people, what they're trying to achieve is to try to extend as long as they can spend in a cold bath. So if they started off being able to sit there for 30 seconds to a minute, they really want to get to 5 or 6 minutes because that's what they feel is comfortable for them, or that's what they feel they're aiming for. And the reality is, you probably do not have to be in there for as long as that time. And really, the science right now is showing that 11 minutes is more than enough. Now, the other thing I would say is that based on the studies that I've read, there isn't anything conclusive to say that these studies are saying that you will definitely improve your heart health, you will definitely avoid getting diabetes, or you will definitely have such an improvement of dopamine and even growth hormone in some aspects. But what they are saying is that there is signs based on the person that's getting tested that there are benefits that could be similar to what I've just mentioned, including metabolism, including dopamine levels, and resilience is something that you can't really test. But basically, my conclusion on cold exposure is that I actually do it. I started probably doing it about a year ago, and I expose myself in showers. I don't actually have a cold bath. I actually just expose myself in showers, and I usually have it running on my head, all through my face, onto my chest, and the rest of my body. And I probably regulate it between anywhere between a minute to 3 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer, just depending on how I feel on the day. But one of the benefits I've seen it for myself, and part of the reason why I do it, is the fact that I just feel like it increases my resilience because it is a tough thing to do. I used to enjoy having showers, and now when I go into the shower, I probably have a shorter shower than what I used to. And I would usually start off with warm water and then go to cold when I finish off, just going from hot to cold rather than going straight into cold. Now, some people might say that's a cop out and that's a weak way of doing it, but for me, that works. And really, it just makes me feel good because the moment I jump out, I'm actually quite fresh. I actually let myself dry out before wiping myself so that I have a bit of that shivering effect once I get out. But by the time you hit 3 minutes, you actually don't feel cold when you step out. And it's surprising to many people. Once you step out, you actually feel great. So I think when I initially started and I used to step out, I used to be freezing and I need to sort of wipe myself down before I felt better. But what I found now is that the longer you stay in, whether it's 2 or 3 minutes, your body basically adapts to that. And the moment you step out, you actually feel quite comfortable, and then you can wait to dry yourself off. So the key point here is not really what I'm doing, but the key point here is if you decided to do it, always look at the signs that you're going too cold. Now, you should aim for a temperature that is comfortable for yourself rather than going to 5 degrees or less. Now, a lot of people, when they start off, they want to just dive into the deep end and go into those temperatures. But you really have to work out whether this is something that works for you and whether it makes you feel good. Now, for me, it does make me feel good. Is there evidence to suggest that there could be lots of other benefits? Probably, but is it concrete at the moment? I don't think so. And so the reason I do it is because it makes me feel good. It's a hard thing to do, and so I put myself through that because I'm trying to push myself through limits that I'm not used to. And that's also part of the reason why I actually tried it in the first place, because I wanted to see the effects of what it has for me. And if I didn't enjoy it, or if I thought it was actually weakening me in any way because my body is in such a way, or my body is not primed in such a way, or I'm not eating well, then I'll probably give it up. So if you were to try it, you could try it by starting off at 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and slowly build yourself up to about a minute. And then you can aim for about 11 minutes for the week, because the evidence or the studies right now basically suggest that's what you need. It's really adapting to that temperature, and you can slowly build up from there. And so, some of the features that you should be looking out for is that the moment you start shivering, if you're going in cold baths, for example, you should stop and kind of move out, because essentially you're putting yourself in a position that you might go into hypothermia and potentially even shock. So I think it's really important that no matter what practice you do, you always start off slow, and you essentially look at it to see whether is this something that benefits you, or is this something that potentially you don't feel that great, you shouldn't be doing it. Now, I hope that helps. And I hope for someone thinking, is this something that I should be doing, or something I should be adding to my list of other activities that I do for my highest performance, then this is potentially something you should try. But again, as I've always said in all my other episodes, if you're not doing the basics, if your health is not good, if your stress is very high, and if you're trying to maximize in certain parts by pushing your body to the extreme, then this would not be one thing I would be trying. Because if your body is already stressed, you're actually stressing your body through cold exposure physically, and that could basically reduce your immunity quite a lot, and you may end up falling ill just because of the fact that your body has gone in overload. And so I would say look out for start off with the basics. And again, I say this in every show that I talk about, start with the basics before you start adding some of this. If you've enjoyed the show, please don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And please share this with a friend who potentially has been thinking of cold exposure, or using some form of cold exposure, or probably has no idea about what to do. They may benefit from this. Until I catch you the next time, speak soon.